Hi, my name is Bryan Dyer. I'm the Senior Acquisitions Editor in New Testament for Baker Academic. Today, I am joined by Daniel Gurtner, author of Introducing the Pseudepigrapha of Second Temple Judaism. Welcome, Dan. Thanks for taking the time to talk to us. So, for those who may not know what the Pseudepigrapha of Second Temple Judaism is that you were introducing, give us just a brief kind of what is it that this book is about, and I know that the language is specific, pseudepigrapha of Second Temple Judaism, and what that means. So
Sure. Yeah, pseudepigrapha is one of those words that everybody tries to avoid because nobody really knows what it means. Technically, it means falsely attributed writings, and that can be a little bit misleading. And that's part of why I did the book is to clarify and dispel a lot of the misnomers about what a pseudepigraphic writing is and is not. Some of them are written in the name of other people. Most of them are not written in the name of anybody at all. So the pseudepigrapha ends up being a category of what it really of exclusion. It's not among the Apocrypha. It's not among the Old Testament. It's not among the New Testament. It's not among the Dead Sea Scrolls, technically, but there's some overlap. So that's been really called the pseudepigrapha. So the collection of writings that I'm talking about are the pseudepigrapha that are of Second Temple Judaism, because the standard set or collection of writings, that of James Charlesworth, which I have right here, most people sort of assume that when these things are published in a collection, that there's some kind of coherence to them. And so that there's sort of a canon of pseudepigrapha. But these writings published in the Charlesworth volumes are, some of them are from the Second Temple period, some of them are much later, and some of them are actually Christian writings. And so what I've tried to focus on are the pseudepigrapha that are demonstrably Jewish. There are some that are debatable. I discussed some of those as well. And that date from the Second Temple period, which I'm dating to 135 CE or earlier, the end of the Bar Kokhba revolt. So a collection of Jewish writings that are not Dead Sea Scrolls, not Apocrypha, that date from around that time period.
Now, so is there, you have a lot of different texts that you talk about in this book. Were there any that you had to exclude, or I mean, it's such a large body of literature, you had to focus in on key texts, or so were there some that you wanted to give more attention, or ones that didn't quite make the cut, or were you able to hit the ones you wanted to?
I was able to cover everything that I really wanted to. There were a handful which afterwards I thought maybe I could have included that, but by and large I wanted to cover the ones that are the largest and most important, most discussed, like the collection of First Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, the Psalms of Solomon, ones that are often used for interpreters, whether it's in early Christianity or rabbinics, to sort of provide some background, but also some ones that are sometimes misused. Testaments of the 12 Patriarchs, for example, are frequently cited as Jewish background when in fact they probably are Christian writings, at least in their current form. And so what I've tried to do is focus on the ones that are pretty clearly Second Temple texts that are Jewish. And then at the end of each chapter, for example, the section on apocalypses, I discuss a number of apocalypses that are sometimes regarded as Jewish, but are really disputed, and give a summary of those. So I was able to cover not everything, but the vast majority of what I wanted to, and also certainly representative texts from the period.
So if you are a student of biblical studies, what is the importance of the pseudepigrapha for students who are studying the Bible?
Well, as Martin Hengel used to say, if all you know is the Bible, then you really don't know the Bible, meaning there's a broader context to it. And so part of what I'm doing in this book, or hope that this book will be helpful for, is first of all, recognizing this literature as literature on its own merits. That is, the Book of Watchers, First Enoch 1 through 36, was not written as New Testament background. It was not written to be a commentary on the Genesis, on the stories of Enoch from the book of Genesis. It was written by communities for particular purposes. So I'm hoping that readers will get an appreciation for this literature on its own merits, and also in doing so will recognize some of the issues, critical issues, some of the things of composition, some of the theological emphases, without sort of leading the witness. And by that, I mean, we sort of might want to ask, what is the conception of messianism in First Enoch 1 through 36? Well, your presumption is that it has a conception of messianism and that it's looking for the Messiah, just because early Christians and the New Testament is depicting things in that way. Doesn't mean that all Jews were, or at least all Jews were in the same way. So my interest is really to, first of all, give readers an appreciation for these writings on their own merits. For people in biblical studies, it certainly gives a great deal of insight into how Jewish interpreters from antiquity understood texts from the Hebrew Bible and Old Testament. So how do we account, for example, for the fact that Joseph marries Asenath from the book of Genesis? He marries an Egyptian woman who was likely an idolater and a pagan. How do we account for that? Some of the pseudepigrapha address that kind of issue. Melchizedek traditions, which become relevant in the New Testament, how are those things addressed? Those are addressed in some of the pseudepigrapha. So there's an appreciation for how problems that are raised in the Old Testament, or that are simply unaddressed, are actually addressed by later interpreters, meaning the Second Temple text. For New Testament interpreters, the most famous example, I think, especially for me who works in the Gospel of Matthew, is looking at Jesus as the son of David. The Psalms of Solomon, written in the 1st century BC, Psalms of Solomon 17, depicts a son of David as a violent messianic figure who's going to cast out unrighteous rulers and destroy and purge Jerusalem of sinners. And that's not the way the son of David is depicted in the Gospel of Matthew. It's a very different kind of figure. So it provides sort of some context for a lot of the notions that we find in the New Testament. The way I like to explain it to students is that it doesn't really change the text of the New Testament at all. That it says what it says and it means what it says, but it sheds light on the New Testament. It's sort of like if you were watching a Shakespearean play on a stage, you know the lines, you see the actors, you still get the words of what is spoken from what is written. But whenever you have trees and rocks and bushes and houses and costumes and things like that, it sheds new light onto the words that are depicted. And so the pseudepigrapha, for me as an interpreter of the New Testament primarily, functions in that way. And I think it can function that way for students of the Bible as well.
So what do you think it tells us that, certain New Testament books either allude to some of these works, or, like in Jude, directly quotes from First Enoch? So what does that tell us about how these texts played a role in kind of early Christian thinking, or kind of that developing Christian thought?
Right. It's certainly the fact that the book of Jude quotes from First Enoch. It certainly indicates that these writings, some of the pseudepigrapha, at least First Enoch, was certainly in writing and in circulation in antiquity, and also that Jude can quote from it. I don't think he quotes from it in regarding it as scripture, but he does quote from it, and also alludes to traditions from the Testament of Moses that he presumes his readers are familiar with. His illustration makes no sense unless he's presuming that his readers are familiar with these traditions. So what it tells us is that some of these writings are in circulation and familiar to the earliest readers of the New Testament, and certainly to the authors.
Yeah, is that I'm trying to remember? Is that from the Testament of Moses? Is that something about his body? What is that reference?
The archangel
Yeah.
Debating with Satan about the body of Moses.
Yeah.
So which actually we don't have an extant text of the Testament of Moses, but the predominant theory is that it was part of a longer version that we no longer have. But
me
the
ask you.
point still is valid that it's in circulation. And David De Silva has also done some work in this in his book on Jewish teachers of Jesus,
Hmm.
where he talks about some of where New Testament authors are actually familiar with some of these traditions. Testament of Job in the book of James, and so forth. My book, is certainly for interpreters of the New Testament. I intend for it to serve as informing their reading of the New Testament. But my book is not primarily written as a background to New Testament or to rabbinic Judaism.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you go about talking about each text? So it's not necessarily a commentary on these texts. How do you introduce students, and what issues do you talk about, and kind of, what can they look for when they're trying to learn about a
Yeah,
specific text?
that's a great question. Some of it I learned from David De Silva's book on the Apocrypha. In fact, that I learned a great deal from his book whenever the first edition came out. The second edition is even better. So it's intended to some degree to be a companion for that.
Mm-hmm.
But also it's sort of to be like standard New Testament introductions are for New Testament texts. So if you pick up a New Testament introduction from Baker Academic, whichever New Testament introductions you have, you expect things like authorship, date, critical issues, who wrote the pastoral epistles, some issues about the text. It was originally written in Greek, and here are the best manuscripts and those sorts of things. And here's a survey of its contents and its theological contribution and how it relates to other texts in the New Testament. That's what you'd expect in a New Testament introduction. That's what I do with these books in the Pseudepigrapha. So there'll be an overview of, presuming that readers know nothing about something like the Testament of Moses. What on earth is the Testament of Moses? What's even a testament? Aside from those little things that you give out in tracts, like at Halloween or something like that, the testament with a gospel tract and a mint or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
What's a testament? It's an account given like a deathbed story that becomes a genre in the Second Temple period. So I introduced readers to the genres, what a summary of what this book is about. I try to get into some of how this book was used by later traditions, some of the reception history. So that's where First Enoch is discussed in the context of Jude. Testament of Job is discussed in the context of the book of James, and so forth. So basically, any of those introductory kind of issues. In terms of what issues are raised, oftentimes there are textual issues. What's the earliest manuscript that we have? Some of it Aramaic text from Qumran, like the Genesis Apocryphon. Some of them, like when we talk about 2 Enoch, they're debatable as to their date and provenance, but they're primarily preserved in Slavonic. So I try to sift through some of that for the readers as well.
Yeah. Let me ask you one last question, talking a little bit about genre, and then you kind of opened this by talking about some of the confusion about pseudepigrapha and what pseudepigrapha is and what pseudepigrapha was. Why do you think this notion of writing in the name of someone else in the Second Temple period, why do you think that was a popular mode of writing, or why do you think that type of literature, why we have so much of it? What was it about writing in someone else's name that became popular?
Yeah, that's a great question. Typically, especially, I mean, in my own circles of evangelical Christian New Testament scholarship, it is seen pejoratively as an attempt and even some recent scholarship has been, that's not in Christian circles, is talking about the pejorative or negative sense of pseudepigrapha, but the intent is not to deceive. And that's where the notion of pseudepigrapha can be really misleading. The intent of writing in somebody else's name is oftentimes to simply evoke a context. For example, the best example I can think of is from Second Baruch. Second Baruch it claims to be written by Baruch, and total disclosure, Baruch is long dead. Baruch was the scribe of Jeremiah. Baruch was long dead. He didn't write this work, and everybody knows it. So why on earth use Baruch's name? Because Baruch was described as the scribe of Jeremiah. And a lot of the notion of Second Baruch is lament similar to the book of Jeremiah. And the second Baruch is written after the destruction of the temple by the Romans in 70 CE. And so there is a lot of appeal to the context of the book of Jeremiah that is thrown into the setting of the destruction of the temple in 70 AD to evoke that Jeremiah kind of context of prophetic lament as well as judgment on apostate Israel. That is not intended to deceive, to say this is really somebody else writing in Baruch's name, but to evoke a context. And I think there are other reasons that authors will use the name of another figure. But I think the most important one for readers to recognize is evoking a context from the name that they are claiming. There's not an intent to deceive, not necessarily even an intent to get a hearing. I'm going to write in the name of Bryan Dyer because everybody would listen to Bryan Dyer, nobody would listen to Dan Gurtner, but rather to evoke a context and to draw comparisons with historical biblical figures.
Yeah, so like especially post 70 with the destruction of the temple, writing in that context of the destruction of the first temple, and then being able to situate yourself there. You also make a note, I think, about also putting yourself within the context of the history of Israel, or making some connection points of kind of continuity. Or I could have that wrong, or
right.
Yeah.
There's certainly in certain texts, there's it's hard to say in general terms, but in certain texts there is a recognition that this is still the way God deals with Israel.
Yeah.
And evoking these same kind of ideas from prophetic figures from the Old Testament.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Dan. It's a wonderful book. I was telling you before this, I don't have a copy yet because it's so fresh out of the printer, but you've gotten one. Which thrilled to see it. It's a gorgeous looking book, very well done. And I think when we're recording it, I think it releases today and is available. So pretty excited about that.
It is available. It was shipped out November 2nd and is available for those who pre-order it. It's available November 3rd.
Yeah. Well, great work, Dan. Thanks for your hard work on that. And thanks for talking to us about it. And yeah.
Thank you.
Blessings.